Good afternoon and welcome to IAP2 Australasia's Lunch with an IAP2 Ambassador webinar. This is the first in this series, and joining us today is Vivien Twyford. My name is Kathy Moses and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Just before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Now, we've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your computer desktop in the upper right corner. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to listen using your phone, select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. Today's webinar is an interactive discussion-based webinar. Now, if you would like the opportunity to be involved, please dial in and follow the prompts to connect to the telephone audio. This should take less than a minute. During the presentation, you will have the opportunity to submit or respond to questions and comments posed by Vivien. To submit a text question, please type your query into the question pane on the right of the control panel and press enter. Vivien will try to respond as she goes. However, if she does not get to your question, we will send her response out in the follow-up email that contains the recording. If Vivien asks a question during the webinar and you would like to make comment, please press the hands up button to flag that you would like to ask a question or provide a response. If you are invited to speak, you will see a notification telling you that you are unmuted. If the time passes and your comment has been made by someone else or Vivien moves on to a new topic, could you please put your hand down by clicking the same button? That would be great, thank you. Now I would like to introduce our ambassador, Vivien Twyford. She will be speaking on the topic, how engagement has evolved over the past 2 decades. Vivien has over 25 years experience as a community and stakeholder engagement consultant at Twyford's and is the inaugural president of the Australasian affiliate of IAP2. She currently serves as a director of Twyford's and is a life member of IAP2. Welcome, Vivien.
Thank you, and we'll try and make this technology as seamless as possible. Can people now see my introductory slide? I'm assuming that people can, and I'll continue unless I hear that people can't. Okay, it's an interesting topic. An overview of 20 years in half an hour is hard, so I picked out some of the things that have struck me on my journey, which started in 1992. It picked up speed in the late 90s. It was pretty much in top gear as a public participation practitioner, trainer, and IAP2 board member in most of the 2000s. But in the last few years, it's changed focus. The 2 threads that I picked out as fundamental to these 20 years for me have been, first of all, the great people, the practitioners, the clients, the communities, and then secondly, the changing technology. And I congratulate those who've worked out how to use that technology to engage better. When I was asked for key topics for this webinar, without thinking very deeply, these few things jumped into my mind. And so these are the things that I thought we'd use as basic topics. First of all, the terminology that we use to describe what we do. Secondly, the IAP2 training and how its introduction, whether it changed things. Thirdly, IAP2 and its professionalisation. Fourthly, the changes in technology that actually enable different kinds of engagement, data gathering and aggregation. And then my particular passion about collaboration and where that fits into public participation. So that's the structure for the webinar. I'm going to let you know my thoughts about these 6 issues, and then if the technology allows, get some thoughts from you. I just want to say right at the beginning that the thoughts in this webinar are mine, and I'm happy that you challenge me on them, because it's just my perspective, and obviously lots of people will have different perspectives on these 20 years. So let's start with the topic of terminology. When I started working in this field, it was known as community consultation in Australia. I know it was called public consultation in New Zealand, but it was pretty much exactly consultation. It was have your say, or tell us what you think about this or that. And it was at its early stages in whether or not it was particularly useful. When I got involved with IAP2 and started using the term public participation, that had a different feel for me. It seemed to me that that was more of a bottom-up term. It was, how do we get participation from the public? How can the public participate, rather than how do we consult with the community? So I quite liked that terminology. It felt to me a little bit more engaging. But then we moved to community engagement. That seemed to be a broad term, but it to me still was a bit more top-down. But it seems to have become the accepted, perhaps, international terminology, although different countries still use different terms. And I guess what I was wondering was, even though the names have changed, whether the intention behind it has changed. Now, this is probably a bit of a test to see whether people would like to contribute at this point. So does anyone have anything they'd particularly like to say about terminology, about they'd like to contribute to this? I'm looking for any green hands. And I see one. Nivek, you have, I'd like to ask Nivek if she'd like to contribute. So how do I do this? I'm trying the technology. Can somebody?
Oh, hello. Hello, Vivien.
Nivek, there you are.
Yeah, look, I was just going to say that I think, I agree with you about the sort of top-down, bottom-up. From my perspective, one of the other things about the language, and I've been looking at this with my PhD research, is around whether it's considered to be part of giving people a role in democratic decision making, in which case some of the academic literature calls it political participation, or whether it's sort of, really engaging with the public servants around, implementation of existing policy, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think the language is quite important. I think it actually does say something about how people think about it.
Great, thanks, Nivek. I agree with you. I've always felt that terminology was one of the things we had to grapple with in order to be a bit more precise about what we were doing. But thanks for that comment, Nivek. Is anybody else who would like to say anything? Let me flick through. Okay, well, I think it's all right. I still grapple with the terminology, with the technology here. But let's move on. And the next topic that I thought was really important, and has certainly been hugely important for me, was the introduction of IAP2 training in this area. And it started for me in about 2002, because in the May of 2002, I was at the Salt Lake City conference, where we actually presented the first 2-day techniques course, which completed the 5-day certificate course. And when I came back from that, and we had agreed that that techniques course did complete the certificate, a cohort from New South Wales Health undertook the whole 5 days of the certificate course, held it out in Western Sydney at Liverpool. And that, I think, was, I'm not sure, it was certainly the first time that I delivered all 5 days in more or less one go, and recognized how all of those bits really fitted together for people. So after that, in 2003, I started running public courses in Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, Brisbane, Perth and Auckland, and we also ran some in-house courses for organisations, and later we added Adelaide, Wellington and Christchurch. So that really brought training to a lot of people, and over the next 20 years, I think probably at least 10 trainers joined the IAP2 team, and I think it's probably fair to say that several thousand people undertook the 3 modules, planning, communication and techniques, over 5 days of training. So I'm actually quite interested in what difference people thought it made to the practice. My own sense is that one of the very important things it did was to bring practitioners together to talk more. I think we hadn't done a lot of talking together. IAP2 didn't really start in Australasia until about 1998, 99. So this bringing of practitioners together and talking together was pretty important, and that helped the recognition of the discipline of public participation and the fact that it required particular skills. It also brought about the recognition of IAP2 as an organization in this area of the world. And what I heard from the people who came to the training was that they really appreciated a structured way of thinking about engaging people in decisions. And perhaps it was the start of a profession or a way of thinking about a discipline. So I'm just wondering if anyone else has any thoughts about what difference IAP2 training actually made to the practice of engagement over the last 20 years. I'm looking for hands. Any hands? No hands at the moment. Okay. Well, we don't. It's not necessary to be too much thinking as a group. This is a webinar, and I'm very happy to talk, but I don't want to give other people an opportunity to talk as well. I think the other aspect that I thought had evolved was IAP2 as a profession and public participation or community engagement as a profession. And so I went looking, and I was actually at an Australian Evaluation Society conference last year, and working with an evaluator, because I've been working with her on a project in New Zealand. And she was talking about, did a presentation on the evolution of evaluation as a profession. And I felt that what she had to say was pretty interesting. So I went looking to find out a bit more about what is the, how does a profession evolve. And it seemed to me that there are some building blocks of a profession. And some of those are that there are norms, standards and principles that come into existence around the discipline, the concepts that are part of that discipline. Then there's an existence of a framework of competencies, capabilities and qualifications. So what is it? What are the skills needed in that profession and how they practiced? And then the existence of a defined process for determining whether the required competencies, capabilities and qualifications are actually met by individuals. I went looking, I did some searching, something about delivering a webinar makes you actually go and do some thinking, and I found some other elements that professions advocate in policy making. They need to demonstrate good governance both in their internal business processes and in their external transparency. They need to be accountable to the public, and that often requires a collaborative approach. And they have responsibilities and functions such as competency, registration, ethics, standards, education. So I looked at my knowledge of where IAP2 is in this space, and it seemed to me that IAP2 is making some really good progress. Certainly the training was the start, and of course the Australasian revision of training and making it more relevant and more appropriate perhaps for the Australasian area, and the fact that there's now being created a tiered recognition pathway where there are continuing professional education points and a clear tier of standards in practice that people can claim by more experience and more education in the field. Does anyone have anything to add on their thoughts about where IAP2 might be on that professionalisation journey? No, I don't see any hands up at the moment, so no problem. We'll keep. But as a general thing, I think that we are becoming more professional as a group. I think the practice is improving. I think the boundaries are being pushed, and we can be reasonably satisfied over the 20-year evolution that we are becoming more of a profession and less of perhaps just a bunch of people who are adding to other people's work. So I then looked at some of the game changers that have really happened along the way over this 20 years. And of course, I think one of the most fundamental ones is the use of the internet, which has provided opportunities to engage more broadly. I saw a figure recently, and I'm not sure, it seems very high to me, but I saw it written somewhere, so I put it in, that perhaps even 98% of Aussie households actually have access to the internet today. And with the NBN spreading out across the country, it will become faster and more useful. That meant that with the internet, the advent of social media has become just something that is integral to our way of lives these days, and that makes exchange of information so much easier. And both the internet and social media have encouraged the emergence of online engagement and data management professionals. I've put a couple of logos up there because the ones that I immediately think of have been Bang the Table and Darzin. They've emerged from people who've been very much associated with IAP2. There are obviously others, and I'm not excluding others, but those are the two that jumped into my head when I thought about those professionals who've really used and helped others to use the internet as a basis for engaging people much more widely than one is able to do face-to-face. I think there have been challenges to the IAP2 top-down approach. Interested in Nivek's comments, and that she also sees the difference between the top-down and bottom-up approaches in terminology. I think there's been a democracy movement, a way of saying, well, if we are a democracy, how is that demonstrated in and increasingly, how can we make it more thoughtful and deliberative? And these ways of thinking have really changed the way that we do public participation, community engagement over the 20 years of my practice. I noticed these changes particularly as a trainer. I'm sure that other trainers would have recognized that the internet, social media, and those ways of engaging people were just not included in the training materials that were created in 2002, even when they were updated in 2003 and again in 2006. And as we continued to deliver training, individual trainers actually had to go and find their own materials to be able to add those components, those new components of community engagement methods and thinking. The democracy movement, with deep democracy, with some of the really big community engagement activities, the Canberra-based deliberative processes that Carson ran, they've just been, and the deliberative processes in Western Australia that were run by Alana Tiernan, the Minister for Planning, that really brought us forward in thinking about how we deliberate much more than perhaps the original community consultation activities of 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, ever thought we would. So to me, those game changers have made this a very different set of activities, a different way of thinking about what we're doing when we are engaging communities. I'm just checking to make sure that nobody's got their hands up at the moment. I don't see any hands, so that's fine. We'll keep moving. The other thing I've been fascinated with is the conversations that have been popping up all over the place, and I'd say in the last particularly 8 years I've seen these conversations happening about the IAP2 Spectrum, about this tool that as trainers we have all used in our training. And one of the things that I found as a trainer and a practitioner together, that the training strengthened my use of these tools, and my use of the tools in practice strengthened my training. So I found it fascinating that there were people who were actually saying, is this spectrum actually useful? And I'm thinking, how can this be? Why would people be questioning it? It's been so useful in my work and my world. And for those of you who are interested in this debate, I would, if you haven't already seen these, I would bring you to a couple of particular debates that I found very useful. I have in front of me a copy of an article in the International Journal of Public Participation from December 2008, which was a conversation between Dr. Lynn Carson, whose face is up there, Larry Susskind, John Dengate, Lewis Michelson, and John Godek. For those of you who've been members of IAP2 for some time, all of these faces and names will be familiar. But there was a really interesting conversation about the spectrum and how useful it was, or it was still being, right from the point of people, some people saying, look, really the only thing that's worthwhile on that spectrum is collaboration and we should junk everything else, through to people saying, as I did, it's such a useful tool, why would we not use it? And I do recommend that article to you, and if you're interested, I'm very happy to send you the web reference, because that's where I think I've had it for a while, but I reread it and found it very, very interesting. But also my very good colleague Max Hardy and Stephanie McCullum, both of whom have been colleagues within IAP2, had an interesting couple of blogs going in 2015, last year, and I would direct you to Max's blog sometime in 2015 and Stephanie's response. You can find Max's blog on his website. But in particular, I direct you to a video of the Perth conference in 2015, a great debate between Max Hardy and Amanda Newberry, facilitated by Joel Levin. Thank you, Joel. And the debate about whether we should throw out the spectrum or we should leave it exactly as it is, or a couple of spaces in between. And the arguments I find to be really interesting and, yeah, something that we should be looking at. My own personal view aligns with the views of Max and Lewis Michelson. I think it's a fantastic tool when used to describe the options that currently exist for the practice of public participation. And I think it supports decision makers, practitioners and communities in helping to set shared expectations, deciding the level of impact that the public should have on any particular decision. But I can see from the conversations and the debates that people interpret it in different ways, which is as it should be. And I think the debate will probably continue. I want to, because this is my webinar, and I wouldn't like to end my conversation about the last 20 years without sharing with you the things where I have progressed to, and I don't believe it's moving away from public participation. I think it's focusing on a particular part of public participation, and that is actual collaborative practice. It's my world and what I do, because I find it to be really fascinating. I think as a society we are facing lots of wicked problems. They've described as wicked in an article from 1994, I think. And the more I read and the more I work with people, I recognize that those problems need to be solved with people and not experts doing things to people and trying to persuade them that this is what they should be doing. I think that collaboration is very firmly on the IAP2 spectrum, but the problem is that there's little current understanding of what collaboration involves and how it needs to be done. And I think from my experience, collaboration takes a different way of thinking and a different way of behaving. We can't just do the same things, do the techniques that are shown up on the collaboration spectrum and expect them to work if we don't think and behave collaboratively. But collaboration takes time and resources, but in my experience, if it's done well, it gets amazing outcomes. So there's my thoughts. I'd like to share with you a quick summary of where I think we are now with after the 20 years of evolution. I think that community participation has become more important over the last 20 years, and that's evidenced by it being required by both domestic and international legislation. I think the discipline or profession, if we're going in that direction, is better recognised and its value is appreciated, and this is in part due to the work of IAP2 in training practitioners, but more particularly in the work of wonderful practitioners who've taken it seriously and done it well. I think the IAP2 spectrum, together with the other tools IAP2 has produced, is still useful and remains a key tool. But I think the practice is still evolving and needs more work in developing and setting agreed standards and competencies. That we should never forget that complex social issues require collaboration on the spectrum and not consultation. Perhaps one of my more controversial beliefs is that the objective of public participation is better decisions, and we should evaluate each project's success on this criterion, on the outcome of the engagement done rather than on the activities, which I think are inputs, or the data information gathered, which are the outputs of engagement. We really need to say, what difference did we make? And this requires engagement with decision makers to understand their requirements and ensure that they in turn share the objectives and the public participation promise to stakeholders. So that's what I have to specifically offer as what I see as the evolution of community engagement, public participation over the last 20 years. And I'm wondering what feedback you have on this. I'd like to thank you for being part of this first webinar. Hopefully you are taking something away, and I'd be very interested in any single word or any quick response that you might have to what you've heard today and what you might be taking away. I see a couple of hands up, so let me go to David Owen. David, let me see if I can, there we go. David, what have you got to offer me?
Vivien, I hope you can hear me. I just want to take you back to the earlier comments on training and professionalism and indicate that I'm just about to finish my advanced certificate, which I've sort of fast-tracked this past year. And while I've enjoyed it and appreciated the skill of the trainers and the collegial work with the other participants, I have to say that if I was on the other side of the employment spectrum and seeking to employ a practitioner in this field, I would be looking far beyond the presence of the existing qualifications that we're able to offer. 10 days just doesn't cut it in terms of professional, pre-service, even in-service training. And that goes to my second point, that the missing dot point in your list of professional attributes is the existence of an underlying conceptual framework or set of conceptual frameworks. It's not just about competencies or capabilities, it's also about, in our case, I think, having philosophical, psychological, and sociological conceptual frameworks that allow us to respond to a dynamic, even volatile environment that we work in. And I don't think at the moment that our training is in any sense linked to those frameworks. And until it is, to talk about professionalism is a little bit previous, shall we say.
Thank you, David. I think that in response to that, I think you're right, absolutely. It's been a very practical trade, well, the one that I trained for 10 years, which is different from the one that you've done, was very much based on practice. and I agree with you that it does need philosophical underpinnings. And I think IAP2 is moving in that direction, but I agree with you that there needs to be more in that arena. Beige, I see your hand up. Can I ask you to what your thoughts?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Oh, look, I was just thinking about how technology has impacted upon community engagement. I've recently started, well, a year ago, as a Director of Community Engagement out in Shepparton at Golden Valley Health. And a few years ago, I finished a doctorate on e-government, but ended up researching all the different websites in local government, and of course community engagement came up and the different tools involved, and having a look at how that impacted on communications and community engagement. So I guess from where I stand at the moment, I'm really, really pleased that IAP2 offers the courses that it does offer, and I'd be keen to find out more information on expanding on from that and learning more about practice. And I don't know if there's many degrees out there that specialise in the field or whether there's more needed. It seems that, you know, IAP2 are the leaders in this field, and I get a lot of input from different, I guess, countries around the world and what they've been doing in terms of community engagement. But I guess I'm keen to learn more, and I guess the last person that spoke sort of hit the nail on the head, was doing a number of these courses, but I'm just hungry for more, I guess.
Well, thank you. Yes, I think once you get into this field, it's helpful to have some of the practical tools that for the kind of advice and help that people who are treading these paths before us. And I've always found that the collegiality of community engagement practitioners has always been helpful. So hopefully IAP2 can help you with that too. But feel free, if you have any questions specifically that you think I might be able to help with, I'm more than happy for you to email me, and I'll or have a conversation. Nivek, I see your hand is up again, so let me ask you what your comments would be.
My comment's not so much to the training, it's more to you know, the changes. One of the other big changes, I think, is citizens' expectations. And I think that's driving, you know, that's driving practice as much as we're, you know, as practitioners leading practice. I think, you know, and part of that could in fact be the greater access to information through the internet and so on. It's hard to know whether it would be there without the internet, but I certainly think that, you know, a lot of the driver for both us as practitioners and for politicians and public servants, people making decisions to use us, engagement practitioners, is coming from citizen demands for more of a say, citizen demands for a different role in democracy, in being part of good decision making.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and those expectations are changing, and they are pushing change, and I think that's a good thing. It's the way it should be. I'm looking at my question box, and I can see that there have been some questions, and I haven't really gone to them because I'm trying to manage a few screens at the same time. But as was promised at the beginning, we'll have a look at those questions, and very happy to provide some answers. What I'd be really appreciative of everyone doing is actually sending a quick email to Carly to just say what you got out of this webinar and how useful it was. Obviously IAP2 is going to run these lunchtime webinars using the ambassadors, and I think we'd all like to know what works and what doesn't. This is the first one, and the first one is the one that we need feedback on most, perhaps. So anything you can tell us about how useful this was, what you took out of it, and how it could be better would be much appreciated. So I think that's probably our time, and thank you for all for participating and being part of it.
Thank you, Vivien. We really appreciate it. It's been extremely insightful and we appreciate your contribution. It's incredibly valuable. And on behalf of IAP2 Australasia and Vivien, thank you all for attending today's event. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact Carly, our membership coordinator, via email at carly@iap2.org.au. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on today's presentation. If you could take a few moments to complete the survey, it would be greatly appreciated, as your feedback is very valuable to us. And of course, you will also receive a follow-up email within the next 48 to 72 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. Once again, on behalf of IAP2 Australasia and Vivien Twyford, thank you for joining us today, and we wish you the very best for the rest of your day. Thank you.